Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. Ooh, do we have a good one for you today? Very quickly, before we get the show started, I do want to remind everyone, well, thank you so much, I should say, to everybody who's already pre-ordered my amazing wife's wonderful new children's book, which was up at the top of the new releases for children's books on the Amazon charts. Healthy Hibernation. My beautiful wife, Lauren Smith, just wrote it. It's her first children's book. It's very sweet, and it's all about just talking to kids about eating healthy and stuff like that. So it's not any of the controversial things that we're about to talk about today. But I will say I saw this morning, and this really tickled me. But because I've promoted it on this show, now when you go on Amazon, it's like if you click on my wife's adorable children's book, you know, Amazon does the thing where it goes, people who pre-ordered this book also read, and all of the books are like the Israel lobby up in by way of deception. It's just, anyway, okay, that was funny to me. Moving on from talking about one mother to another one, my good friend, Candace Owens, who has been just on fire in a way that is hard, almost impossible to overstate over the last, I mean, really, look, you've been a huge force in conservative media for many years now. Over the last couple years after, you know, parting ways with the Daily Wire, you got even bigger. But now just over this last stretch, you've really become the mover of the narrative, at least on the conservative side of the aisle. And I really, you know, I've talked to Tucker this week, and I really wanted to talk to you also about this massive kind of cancellation attempt. So Candace Owens, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to see you.
I'm so excited to do it. One day we're going to have to do it in person, but on your show. But yeah, I'm excited to be back.
Well, next time we're in the same city, we'll make sure that happens. Whoever show it's on, maybe we'll do it on your show, seeing how big that show is these days. I should probably be focused on that one. It has been there's been something that, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this, because obviously there's been this big cancellation attempt primarily against you and Tucker. Although by proxy, I guess I've been caught up in it a bit. Obviously, both you and Tucker, well, Tucker was fired from Fox News. You were fired from the Daily Wire. Both went on to be much bigger after getting canned. And yet now there's this attempt again to cancel you. And we're all kind of wondering, like, from what? Like, what would you even cancel them from? And I just thought, you know, I was very close friends with Joe Rogan when he was going through that major cancellation attempt in the 22 in the height of COVID insanity. I was the first one on his podcast after all that stuff really went down, and I was out doing shows with him. And I remember at the time having this feeling where all of them kind of hadn't admitted it yet. The corporate media hadn't admitted that Joe Rogan is the biggest thing in media. They did eventually after the 2024, but at the time it was like so weird, because you're like, wait, Brian Stelter is trying to cancel Joe Rogan? Doesn't he know? And so anyway, as Mark Levin is openly calling for you and Tucker's cancellation, and Dinesh D'Souza, people like this are openly calling, it is just funny because you're like, objectively right now, you and Tucker are the two biggest conservative political commentators. This is just undeniable. And so their plan right now is, we want to cancel number one and number two. This is just like, how do you even get away with doing that when the people have already told you they're on their side, not yours? Right. What's it been like for you to just kind of watch this?
Well, yesterday was a fantastic day. I mean, to get the email from Podscribe, number one podcast in the world. And of course, I am humbled by it, truly, because the audience is the reason. Like, this truly was a free market response. And to go back and find the people who worked day in and day out to ruin my life. It wasn't like they just wanted me gone from the Daily Wire, which they got and they celebrated and effectively danced on my grave. It wasn't, they then were trying to get my speaking events canceled. They were the ones that put pressure on Charlie not to let me speak. And I said to him, dude, I got enough going on. Like, I don't want you to also just by proxy catch a flame because they want to cancel me. They got me banned from Australia. I had to cancel a tour, right? Simply because I didn't agree with Israel. That you would think that I harmed somebody by having a different opinion. And I think the reason why yesterday was such a win was precisely because they worked so hard and tried to destroy me, and we survived. That's where their true hatred and vitriol is coming from, is the fact that we survived a virtual assassination attempt, right? It's like we shouldn't have survived it. given everything they did. And even the element of how they wanted me to be fired, like the element of surprise for Tucker to be fired. He's doing a show on a Tuesday, suddenly on a Wednesday, he doesn't get to say goodbye to his audiences. I really do believe even that was a part of their like sadistic effort to be like, you are no more. And so, yeah, it feels good. And I'm really happy to say all I did was commit to the truth, and I didn't allow peer pressure to come to something that's actually evil. Like, we're not even, it's like, do you agree that Palestinians should be genocided? No. Okay, well then you're going to be canceled. You're never going to be on a Republican stage ever again. Okay, bye. I'll just do my own show. Okay, you're not going to be allowed to speak at the CPAC or the RNC. You're not going to get an invite to the White House. Okay, bye. I'd like to keep my morals and my principles in line. If I never get to go to Mar-a-Lago again, at least I can lay my head on the pillow and know that I'm not cheering for children to die, irrespective of whether they're Palestinian or Israeli. I'm not going to root on children dying. And so I think also something that's important to remember, Dave, is these people do not believe in the free markets. That's the number one thing to remember. They want people to be artificially pushed out of the free markets so that they can say they're number one. They love a world where, like what happened back, what was it in 2020, when people were getting knocked off of platforms left and right. Maybe it was earlier than that, actually. It was before Trump was president. They love that world where you're artificially kicking out the Gateway pundit. You're not allowed to be on Facebook anymore. You're artificially kicking out Alex Jones. You're not allowed to platform. And then they go, we're number one. We are the number one most listened to conservative news podcaster. It's like, no, you're not. There's no market here. And that's what they want right now. They want their markets to be restricted so that they can be number one again.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's right. And because in a way, if they make, look, if the punishment, let's say like for whatever, like it was in the old guard where like, if you canceled someone, that was it. There wasn't like another, they couldn't just go start their own podcast or something. Like when Bill O'Reilly got fired from Fox News, I mean, I guess he did go start a podcast, but even back then it was like, it just wasn't as big of a market. And also his audience was a lot older. They weren't getting into like the technology. So he goes from being a guy who's speaking to like 5 million people a night to being a guy who's speaking to like 80,000 people when he does a show. Mm-hmm. And that's like, that sucks. And, you know, you could see where the pressure would be like, hey, look, are you sure you want to say this one thing that'll piss everybody off? Because then you lose the right to say all the other things that you also might think are important. And you make people make these calculations in their mind. But you going to number one, it's like, oh, no, not only is there not a price to be paid, there's a reward in the market for people going like, oh, yeah, she stood up for what was right. And as you talk, like when you get down to the specifics of it, what you're talking about is like, I mean, I don't know, me and you've been reading the news for 2 years on this. You're talking about what? Children being shot at as they desperately try to get food because they've been starving for like, I'm sorry, the American right wing is still made up of a lot of Christians and a lot of people who are just like, what? No, they're decent people. They're not going to go along with this. And the thing is like, they kind of never got presented the opportunity to hear from people who were going to make that argument. And you've been a part of this huge like test study of like, well, how would it work if there was actually a market? And yes, I think it's incredibly rewarding for me to see you being the number one podcast, because it shows that like, yeah, like you demonstrated that people could have the courage to say the right thing. And then the audience demonstrated that like, yeah, and there's a lot of people who will have your back if you do that. I just think that's a great precedent to be set.
It is. And I'm so grateful because I want to remind people, you might think of me now as anti-Israel, but when they came after my entire life, I just wanted to learn about the topic. I actually didn't have a perspective, but I knew that I didn't know everything. And they were just so vicious with, no, you have to come out and you have to say these things. And I was like, look, I don't know anything about this. Let me speak to speak to other people. Like I watched Bassem go viral, the clip go viral where he was holding up the chart. And I was going, whoa, that is kind of crazy. Like, are this many Gazans dying? Then I went back and I watched some old content of you on Joe Rogan speaking about the topic. Then I hosted you at the Daily Wire, and that was a a big wake up call. And I really was coming from a place, it's still one of my favorite episodes. I think they pulled all the content down, but just learning about Middle Eastern politics, I'm not presenting myself as an expert. And I think that is what also the market is responding to, is at least I want to learn. At least I am showing that I will correct where I was wrong. I was working for PragerU, Daily Wire. I was working with Zionists. I obviously had no hatred in my heart towards the Zionist cause. And then it was just asking the question. Like, I was messaging with Max Blumenthal because, strange allies, right? And he has done some really incredible work. And I went back and I found these messages from a time where I simply retweeted Max Blumenthal on something that he said about Kyrie Irving that I agreed on. So it wasn't even about Israel. And I got messages, like, all I can tell you is like Agent Smith. I sent it to him. It's crazy. Like Marissa Strait, Dave Rubin. And I actually apologized to them because I was like, wow, this guy must literally be Hitler. Like, I didn't know. I just saw it trending and I retweet him. That's what kind of goes on behind the scenes. Like, they are actually presenting themselves as free speech thinkers. And then they put pressure on people and tell them, hey, even listening or retweeting Max Blumenthal, you may not know it. And they told me this. He's an anti-Semite. Like, he's a committed anti-Semite. Max Blumenthal.
Yeah.
Like, so it's a different time now. And that sort of, we're going to tell you what to think and you're going to like it, is not like, people aren't buying it anymore.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think one of, like, there's a lot that's just been revealed. And there was a lot of things about, like, even, the conservatism Inc. online type people like Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro and even Steven Crowder and like a lot of guys like this who really rose to prominence during the craziest woke years. They were kind of the figures who were speaking up against the insanity, like being like, no, actually, you're a dude in a dress. You're not a chick. And, that was necessary to some degree. It was pretty crazy what was going on in college campuses, and the whole left-wing wokeism stuff in general was crazy. But because that was the dynamic, and because, for whatever reason, while tons of other right-wingers were being deplatformed, those were the ones who weren't, and in fact were very pushed by the YouTube algorithm and stuff. I mean, I remember for years, I always hated Ben Shapiro, and for years YouTube was like, I know you want to watch Ben Shapiro, and I was like, I do not. I've never told you that, YouTube, but YouTube kept insisting I did. I was aware.
You do. Yeah, you do.
Well, I was aware of this because, as I've been talking about lately, because I was a Ron Paul supporter back in the day. And I remember Ben Shapiro saying like that Ron Paul wants to strangle Jews and that he's a vicious anti-Semite. And I'd be like, whoa, like, and you realize you're like, oh, it was easy in those years for them to pretend like that wasn't actually all they cared about. But actually, that's all they care about. And I mean all they care about. And this has been revealed. This is the thing with the neocons. This is why even the original core neocon group, they were all a bunch of commies who then became Democrats, who then became Republicans, and then became Democrats again. And why they when they were George W. Bush Republicans, they were like, marriage is between a man and a woman, and our culture is getting out of, because they just thought that was the best way to get votes for their wars. And then when Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton, they went, okay, she likes the wars. We'll go support Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Marriage,
exactly
gay marriage, anyone who's against gay marriage is a homophobe or whatever. Like, but they don't actually. And so, look, just think about it, right? Why would someone like Ben Shapiro, at the very least, wouldn't he have liked a lot of things about Ron Paul? Oh, he's the most fiscal conservative guy. He's the strict constitutionalist. He's a devout Christian who, believes in traditional values. There's a million different things that you would look. You would go, oh, I like a lot of his thing. I do disagree with him on foreign policy. Nope. He's evil. As soon as you're not on board with Israel and Israel's wars, you're evil. And I think part of what happened here is that you, just by doing what you did, it demonstrated that not only, it's not like it went from like, Candace is great. She's been heroic on all these issues. We really disagree with her on this one. It went, all of that's gone. In one day, you go from being like our favorite person who we champion, who we put billboards up on, to you are the most vicious, evil human being in the world for saying, I just had some babies and I'm seeing this mom holding her dead babies. And I'm thinking to myself like, oh my God, what would it be like to hold your dead baby? Geez, that's horrible. Like, that's enough to make, and just people seeing that, like, can't pretend they're not seeing what they're watching.
It's so true. That is how gentle it was. I had seen it was a dead Palestinian child, and she looked like my daughter. And I was going, well, this is crazy. Like, this is not just a black and white issue. I need to actually learn about this issue. And as soon as you express a feeling, I describe it very much. It is a psychological operation that is meant to break you. And there's no question in my mind that they have done experiments to see. I mean, this is really going back to what Kanye was saying, and he's not the greatest orator of our time, but this is what he was describing was happening to him in Hollywood, where he was this is what he was trying to break free from. And of course, he notoriously says, I'm about to go DEFCON 3 on some Jews. And they made it seem like he had tanks and he was going to come in and he was going to start just like lighting up Jews in Los Angeles. But in reality, everyone ignored the fact that Harley Pasternak was, and this was one of the people he was referring to. He was also referring to at that time Scooter Braun. Justin Bieber has now kind of said things about Scooter Braun. Who knows what's true and what's not? I mean, I've had friendly conversations with Scooter, so I don't have a horse in the race. But the point is he was trying to say that there is this psychological operation that sweeps in if you do not actually peddle certain talking points or certain perspectives, particularly in Hollywood. I didn't understand what he was saying at that time. Then I went through it politically and I was going, what is actually happening? I mean, the peer pressure, you're going to do this or you're going to lose everything. We saw that even in Charlie Kirk's text messages. There is not a single person that bent over more for the pro-Israel cause than Charlie Kirk, but it wasn't enough because they were so angry, Dave, particularly Josh Hammer was angry, Dave, that you annihilated him in a debate on stage. And how did you annihilate him? I don't know, just by being a human being. I don't know, and Tucker Carlson gets out there and Charlie was going through it. Okay. And that shows you they do not care. Everything instantly gets wiped. And for me, the attack they always do is they kind of try to make it seem like you're going crazy. That's the wildest part to me, is reading back the messages and they're like, oh, we're your friend. They always come at you as a friend. Like, I care about you. Like, are you okay, Dave? I saw you wrote that tweet about that Palestinian child and you said it looks sad. Like, are you okay? Like, is your marriage okay right now, Dave? Like, are there some things going on at home, Dave? Like, I'm your friend. Like, you can always call me. This is their strategy behind the scenes. And it's also their strategy in front of the scenes. I think Seth Dillon is a literal demon. I will never, I can't explain to you, there's something very dangerous, psychologically wrong with him. This is how they behave. And it's important for people to see that. I'm obviously at the time it wasn't fun to go through it, but I am ever resilient on topics when it comes to principles. And I would rather burn everything to the ground and make new friends when I realize that I am in a toxic relationship, whether that's an employment, whether it's a personal friendship, it has to go. And people now know that it can be done. You can survive it and people will be with you. Even if it's not immediately, they'll start to wake up and see that repeated pattern that you always talk about, where someone says something completely normal and then it's like a button gets pressed.
Yeah. And just all of that, as when I was saying back to say 2017 or 2018 or something like that, the energy that Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson were able to kind of take hold of was that they were the ones saying, like, you guys are afraid to debate. You guys need to rely on censorship. You have to rely on demonizing your opponent rather than just addressing their ideas. Mm-hmm. And now they just can never say that again, because we saw what happened as soon as their ideas got questioned, and then they all turned into the exact same thing. And that's just, the hypocrisy like that is very hard these days in this media environment, in this spiritual environment, whatever exactly it is. It's just very hard for people to keep their own lies from being exposed.
Right.
So I wanted to, obviously I want to talk a bunch about Charlie and because you've been doing a lot of shows on this. And so it seems to me, and a lot of shows that, shows that have been some of the most highest rated shows, part of the reason why you have the biggest podcast right now. I was talking about this on the show a few weeks ago, but I was watching one of your shows, but I was like, I had it on my phone and then I was kind of like wrangling kids also while I was doing it. So I'm watching the show and it's live and there was like over 300,000 viewers live. And then I paused it because I had to go do something with the kids. And then I came back, and like when I came back, the show wasn't live anymore. But it was still like I had it paused where I was in the stream, and I looked down and it was only 15 minutes after the show had been live and it was over 1 million views already on just on YouTube on it. I was just like, yo, there's so many people watching this right now. It's really unbelievable. and there's been something very interesting about the way you've been covering this. Well, I mean, look, it's a little uncomfortable to say, but like part of what's interesting and part of what's compelling about it is that you're Candace Owens, you're this pit bull who's got a hold of something, and everybody knows you're not letting go until you shake out everything that there is in there. Then you're also like a woman who's in deep grief, very clearly, over losing like a very close friend. And so it's just like it's very, real, and human people can relate to it. It seems to me, and I kind of want to talk to you almost about like what you think the biggest things are that you've revealed so far, like where we are now if we try to put this all together. But it seems to me the things that the takeaway that I find the most interesting so far is that, and correct me if I'm getting any of the chronology of this wrong, but I think I got it pretty much right. So you basically come out in the wake of the biggest political assassination in modern American history, and a good friend of yours, and you go, look, here's the deal. Charlie was really at war with the Israel lobby and with all of the Zionist handlers around him. They were threatening him. They were pulling funds from him. He had basically gotten to the point where he was like, I don't support any of this anymore. And immediately that was met with accusations of she is out of her mind. She's lying. This is I believe Josh Hammer called it an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. There was all types of that. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu is selectively reading lines from Charlie's letter. Now, by the way, he doesn't mention that the rest of the letter, at least the rest of the letter that we've seen produced, is like the whole theme of it is like, this Hasbro bullshit is not working at all. We need to deal with I'm getting killed out here is the whole letter. He omits that and just reads the part where it's like, I sure do love Israel so much, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, all of them are saying the idea that there was a Jewish donors were pulling money, or that he was in some war. Now, the thing that always at the very beginning made it very believable that you were saying this is that, well, number one, you're good friends with him. And number two, we all saw that Megyn Kelly interview. So like we all kind of know what's going on a little bit.
He was hosting you on stage. I mean, if you're like so committed to the pro-Israel cause, you stay away from Dave Smith, right? I mean, that's a pretty easy thing to not invite Dave Smith to do a debate on stage when you know he's going to win.
Well, that was, and I mentioned this also at the thing. There was something about me, because look, obviously he had Tucker and he had Megyn Kelly there, who both essentially said Mossad was Epstein and were very, Tucker certainly was very critical of the Israeli government. But Tucker and Megyn are Tucker and Megyn. So like you have to have them at a conservative conference. Who could tell you're not going to have them? They're like legacy icons of the conservative movement. But there was no need to have me. Like that was a choice. Like that was just, he could have just not invited me. But anyway, so then this all gets exposed, or this, you get attacked for making up this nonsense. And now all of the receipts have been produced that this part I don't even think is in dispute by anyone at this point, that yes, millions of dollars had been pulled out of Turning Point USA over platforming Tucker Carlson and maybe to some extent me or whatever. And then also the biggest one is this thread, this group chat where he actually literally says in writing that I'm forced. I have no choice other than to abandon Israel. And then the other thing that is a real important detail here, which really, can't be overstated, is that Charlie's right-hand man there, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, Andrew, is it? At Turning Point? Yes. So Andrew, who I met down at that event, who was always by Charlie's side, he confirmed not only that the group chat was real, that he's the one who took the screenshot of it, and that he sent it to the authorities, which is like, look, it's just, I'm not saying that proves anything about who done it, but it is like the fact that the closest guy in the organization to Charlie found that information to be relevant enough that he's like, the authorities should know that he just said he was turning on Israel. Now, correct me if I'm getting any of the chronology of this wrong, or if there's more stuff you want to add, but that at least is like, that at least justifies your entire investigation into this, that you're like, hey, you guys were saying this whole thing was crazy. And we're at least at the point where like, no, it's pretty much confirmed by all that that's exactly what was going on.
I was just sitting back and amazed at how quickly Bibi Netanyahu interjected himself in this situation. He was not a personal friend of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk obviously had an affinity for Israel throughout his career. Everybody knew he was changing in the end. It was such a strange thing that they then tried to say that that wasn't real. So that obviously immediately for me becomes a compelling motive because there's no reason to lie. This is like what I said about the Bill Ackman summit. There's no reason to lie. You could easily say, which is 100% true, Seth Dillon pressed him. They did this whole meeting. Bibi Netanyahu calls, invites him to Israel. Charlie says no, offers to fund Turning Point to the next level, which is totally normal for like a sitting prime minister of a country that's fighting a 97,000 front war. And Charlie said no. Okay. And if they had been like forthcoming and everyone had just kind of told the truth, I would have just been like, okay, like this is like some crazy lefty that did this. There's just never a reason to lie. Even if I get into a fight with Charlie day before he dies, I would be like, my biggest regret is that my last words to Charlie were F you. And this shows you life can be taken from you at any moment. Like I am just beside myself. They were obsessively lying, trying to bury this thing. And it made me go, something's just not right here. Okay. Then I learned, thanks to the Turning Point people, like the younger people at the organization were just like, there's a lot of lies being told. Charlie was concerned about finances, particularly he didn't know where the money was coming from. That's a very strange thing. I saw evidence of that. I obviously then presented the Doge email. He 7 days before he dies says, I'm going to start, audit, like a personal audit campaign inside a Doge committee inside to figure out things, where it was going, where it was coming from and who it was going to. That's not a normal thing for somebody to be wondering about their company and then they're dead. So everything was a lie. And honestly, the one that struck me as the oddest was them lying about the Catholic thing. Okay. And I'm including Andrew Colvett in this because what's this got to do with anything? I'm thinking, right? We all know Catholic gang. We knew he was going to mass daily sometimes. We knew he had the St. Michael pendant. I knew that Erica had flown a priest right when he died. And they're getting up here and they're like, no, he just liked the architecture and he would sometimes he would go in there and because he just liked pretty walls. I'm like, what is this lie about? Right. So I'm putting together a picture, and the obvious thing to me, if I am a detective, is you're only lying because you're hiding something, right? And it seems to me like they're trying to not upset the very people that were pressuring him. They want him to be this committed Christian Zionist. He never faltered on it. If you want that money to keep going, are these donors still pressuring you? Now, why is Bibi Netanyahu lying? I don't know. But what I do know is we aren't getting the truth about anything. Then you couple that with Turning Point is lying, covering. That could just be financial, trying to protect the finances after Charlie, who knows. But then you add the Fed messages that they didn't want to give us a time about. The person's writing like they're in, 1887. This just young gay 20-year-olds writing like we're in 1887. It's a nonsense. They have no explanation for that. I know that makes no sense. I've got contact with the family. They're telling me that the feds are even lying about why he turned himself in. They basically were told, we'll slam down your doors or you can come in peacefully. What are you going to do? Like, hey, we got you no matter what. You have two options here. He turned himself in, the family friend. I mean, there isn't a single thing they have told us, unless believe in the fantasy of the Superman neck because Charlie ate healthy, right. And a 30-06, which would have decapitated him, as every hunter knows. He stopped it. He saved lives and he stopped it. And this was just your regular Christian miracle. It's all nonsense. Okay. We don't know what happened, but we certainly know that what they're telling us is bullshit, right? And people we're just so tired of being sold slop. Another thing that struck me as very odd was they were pushing this kid, Breland Holland. You may have seen this, like a nice kid. He's like young and
But it looks like he was made in an AI lab or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like nice kid. Trump mentions this kid in his speech at the memorial. Okay. Donald Trump mentions this kid who he doesn't know. And he's like, Charlie interviewed this kid who was only in fourth grade, blah, blah, blah. Hi, I was there for the interview. Trump wasn't. Why is Trump mentioning this? It was a random side podcast that we did when we did an event down in Alabama. Who put this in your speech? Okay. This had nothing to do with you, Trump. You didn't even know that I was there, right? Because somebody put this in your speech. That seems to me like you're just kind of trying to set the stage for this kid who's controlled by Israel narratives to become the new Charlie Kirk. So it just smells, and I'm covering it meticulously. And there obviously is an emotional investment here. Charlie was an amazing person. You know, he really was. He held the line. And when he gave an inch, like, okay, I won't have Candace, there's a reason he then said, and now you get Dave Smith, Tucker Carlson, and everybody else who's anti-Israel. That's how he was. He was very strategic. And I know he pissed off Bibi Netanyahu and his boys because he is the single reason, okay, that we did not go to war with Iran. You guys may think that's crazy. It's a fact.
No, it was a big, that was a big deal. And look, I remember it. I remember texting him and giving him a lot of credit for it at the time, because it was like what happened was, as Trump is flirting with what it turned into the 12-day war, or around the time when Israel starts first bombing and it wasn't clear whether or not we were going to get in on it. It was like, again, like it was you, Tucker, like all these people, Steve Bannon, there were all these people who, I mean, like really, really influential, like high level. I remember talking about it at the time and being like, I've just never seen anything like this before. Like this would be like in 2004, like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh all turning against George W. Bush's policy in the war. Like, what would that look like? You can't even like imagine it. Or Rachel Maddow and all of them turning against Obama or something. You never saw. But here you have this, and then Charlie, who was more. Look, obviously he was more. He was in a slightly different game than the rest of us are in. Like, he wasn't just doing a show. He was doing a get out the vote youth organizational big tent Republican thing. So he was always the most just pro-Trump of the group. Like, not that all of you guys might have supported Trump, but that was Charlie's identity. And then when even he came out and was just like, no, dude, like, we are not, this is not what the Trump base wants. Like, this is not, that is a huge, look, again, to some degree, it's hard to prove the counterfactual or what influence everything had, but that made it that there was such a political price for Donald Trump to have escalated the thing. Like,
and he was saying this to his face at the White House. And Charlie was, as someone said to me, and this is a perfect way to put it, Charlie was a maestro, right? So he would play like, hey, you know, Mr. President, here's why, and here's whatever. And then he'd go and he'd call me, and he'd call like Matt Gaetz and Tucker. He'd be like, hammer him, showing you, like, you know, the market, they don't like this, whatever. And he won. Like, in a room full of people who wanted him to go to war with Iran, Charlie Kirk made the difference. And I don't take Bibi Netanyahu as someone who would take that lightly, right? And everything he has done since Charlie has passed, trying to assert his legacy as he never blinked on Israel, it makes me uncomfortable, okay? Now, that's a feeling, and I've expressed that feeling, but I've also been meticulous about delivering a timeline of the facts, and it is very clear that some funny business started happening after the notorious event where you and Tucker spoke at, and they were enraged, and the donors were enraged. They took millions of dollars, and he said after that, he said no to Bibi Netanyahu. He said, no, I don't want your money. I don't want to take Turning Point to the next level. I've now recently, which I haven't presented yet, am learning how much money each person at Turning Point lost when when Charlie said no to Bibi Netanyahu, because they were going to get a percentage of that. And that's interesting. Anybody investigating a crime knows, look at financial motives, right? Common sense, look at financial motives. And they're emotionally manipulating us like it's disrespectful to his legacy to pursue truth. I knew Charlie. I'm not listening to them. You do one of two things when you go through something like that. I suffered a real trauma. I had to take 2 weeks off because I couldn't even process what was happening, and the way they were trying to get us to just forget about it. Dave, just move on. His legacy is he loves Israel. It's over. And here's what you can do if you love Charlie, donate. Okay. No. I was behind Turning Point because Charlie was there. He's not there. I need to know what and who is running this organization now behind the scenes. And I'm not going to accept that, okay, well, Erica Kirk, on paper, she's a chairman and she's a CEO, but you don't learn how to be a chairman and a CEO overnight because your husband died, right? That's just a fact. I couldn't be a chairman and a CEO. And I've been in business. My husband does all of that because it's not my natural interest. You have to actually like the mundane. You got to read the contracts and you got to understand the LLC structures, the contractors that you're bringing in for a company that's worth $100 million, Dave. Okay, there's some snakes in the garden, and I'm here to cut the grass and figure out where they are.
Yeah, well, and I think also people don't understand how talented Charlie was, and that's natural. That's the way things work with really talented people. Like, they make it look kind of easy, and then everybody else kind of doesn't really. But it's like, just to be like, people don't understand how good you have to be to go just like do what he would do and hold court with all of these students and debate 1,000 different people and then go, like, you got to be really good to do that. But then also people in a weird way go, Charlie did what all of us do, and then he ran this gigantic organization, which really, I mean, really moved the needle in a very powerful way. In fact, might be the reason why Donald Trump is president. I mean, if you go look at the polling data from 2024, the youth movement was a huge difference for Donald Trump, and I'd have to double look at that, might have been the margin of victory. It was a big deal. And by the way, all those youth are now going back to the Democrats. At least that's what it looks like as of this week, which is an interesting thing to think about.
I'm not going to vote, so there's that.
You know, there's a real interesting dynamic there that I kind of that I do want to talk to you about a bit, where it seems like it's almost, and in a way, I think this was something that was one of Charlie's big concerns. Okay, we'll get to this in a second, but you know, it was like, I know, so essentially, right, like everybody started kind of releasing messages, and you know, Netanyahu is selectively reading from the letter, Bill Ackman's releasing text messages, you end up releasing some group checks, and you had that one show where you called on, you were like, hey Dave, Tucker, like whatever you guys got, like, and I was like, okay. So I looked through my text message with Charlie. Now I didn't know, we became friends over this last year, but I didn't know him like the way you knew him. We weren't like close like that, but I was like, I wonder if and I didn't really have much, but I had that one text message that he did send me right after I debated Douglas Murray, where he was like, this Murray guy was really full of shit. And he goes, you know, I actually agree with almost all of what you were saying there. And I did release that because I do think, like, look, even if, let's just say there is a thorough investigation, it gets done with, you know, there's cameras in the courtroom, we all get to see the evidence, please. And we really are at the end of this. Like 8 months from now, me and you are talking and we're like, it was Tyler Robinson, and it was, you know, like, this is just, the evidence does look like he was a lone left-wing nut. Okay, fine. It's still, the fact is that when somebody young, who's so beloved by millions of people, gets killed in such a public, gruesome way, in such a high-profile political assassination, that people trying to hijack his legacy, like, that matters. And I'm sorry, like, if you're going to tell me that Charlie Kirk, there is no daylight between him and Ben Shapiro, or him and Josh Hammer, or him and Benjamin Netanyahu, let me tell you what none of those guys do, is text me after my debate with Douglas Murray and go, you know, I really agreed with most of what you said there. They don't say that. You're an evil enemy to them at that point. And that wasn't Charlie's attitude. Charlie's attitude was like, I get what you're saying, man. Let's talk about this more. Like, we should hammer this out. And so at the very least, even if it's not something to do with the actual, like, crime, this is all still very relevant to get to the bottom of, like, what was going on here. And then, of course,
by the way, you're speaking to his character. And that's what I wanted people to understand, for the people that were like, oh, Charlie was just doing whatever for Israel. Charlie was pro-Israel like I was pro-Israel, because he actually believed it at that time. He was an authentic human being. It was not this like hardcore political idiot. He wasn't in a cult, and he was transformative. If he thought something and he was wrong, he would change his mind and he would tell you how he got there. And they knew that about him. They knew that he was not a cult member, and that money was not going to be something that was going to make him go, okay, well, I'm just going to say the thing and look like a fool. What Charlie wanted more than anything else was to win. Okay. In order to win, you have to be right. In order to win, you have to be right long term. And so Charlie would do the due diligence. He would study things. He would have the conversations, and he was landing up. He was just winding up on the other side of this thing, like I did, where it's like, hey, and that's what I said to him. I was like, when you start looking into this, you're feeling the pressure, you're going to see something's very wrong. Like, we did not have this right, Charlie. We did not have this right. And because he had that humility to admit that he was wrong, he no longer served their purpose, right? That's what I realized. They will throw you out and coordinate behind the scenes, have all their sycophants go after you, take quotes out of context, start with the articles. He's flirting with anti-Semitism. You know, he put on a hot dress and he saw anti-Semitism, whatever. It's like, that's kind of where they start. And it's like, that's like the threat of the articles that are about to drop. And Charlie said no. And so that is one of the things that makes me just so happy. And like, you know, when I just pray, I just want him to know, like, you died with your soul intact. And something that brought me such peace was a donor at Turning Point USA, who was very close with Charlie, said to me in the immediate aftermath, a soul that is in struggle will free itself, right? One way or the other, it will free itself. And I think for Charlie, his soul was starting to struggle. And to know that his last things that he said to them was like, no, F you, keep your money. Like he died a free man. And I think that that's really important for people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, if I just can't imagine, like for say to Josh Hammer, who supposedly was a close friend of Charlie Kirk's, and according to him was which is, I think, very weird to be saying right after he died. Like, even if this was true, I would find this very bizarre to be saying. Like, if you if I just like the first podcast, just knowing Charlie the way I knew him, if I like the first
I'm so
podcast,
sorry Dave Smith died. The last thing Dave Smith said to me, we had this conversation. He was like, Candace, your feminism book was amazing.
But,
and I want to go to makehimasandwich.com and buy your feminism book. And it was the last loving conversation we had. It was really close to Dave.
By the way, and I like your book on feminism, but like if I died and then you did a show about it afterward, I'd find it kind of weird if that was
not
just
one show. It was his first tweet after Charlie died.
And then
it was his first tweet. He did multiple shows about it.
Oh my God. And he almost, even the way he says it, like I pointed this out on the show at one point, that every single interview, he always says the horrific murder of my friend Charlie. It just always in those words. It's always the horrific murder of my friend. It's like, why are you talking to me like you focus group says it? Like, I don't want the global language dictionary here, dude. Be a human being. Talk about what, and I would just imagine, like, whatever it is, like me and you, we agree on all types of issues. And like, let's say like right before, like, God forbid something happened to you. The night before, you were texting with me and you were like, I don't know, Dave. I mean, I know you've been saying we should end the Fed and have like a free market and money, but I'm really thinking we need a central bank and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, shoot, like Candace is like, diverting from the thing that we agree on or whatever. And then like, God forbid you got killed and they'd be like, oh, Candace was turning on the idea of Ron Pauly and, free market economics. I'd be like, well, she was exploring other ideas. It was a time when there was a lot of but to just lie, I would find that to be such a betrayal of I'd be like, yeah, it was a shame. I would have convinced her though, we were going to argue about it. And I bet she would have come back to agreeing with me after that. Like, just say something like that. Why, like, why, there's just something very profoundly wrong about lying
it's not just
about
profoundly
your friend.
wrong. It is demonic. That's what I'm saying. Most of us have something spiritually that would stop us from doing it. So we either don't want to talk about it at all because we're embarrassed, right? Like, I don't even want to talk about the fact that we were fighting, which is fine. But to race out of the gate before anybody even cares about what your last conversation was, and to lie about his state of mind, to lie about, and knowing he was feeling so much pressure too. Like, he was like hurting over this. Like, you know what I mean? And you just lie. There is something spiritually wrong with Josh Hammer. So I don't even accept that, like, oh, like it's disgusting, it's wrong. It's like, no, this is actually demonic. Okay. A regular human being can't do that. There's certain things you just go, oh, I'm sorry. I that makes me really uncomfortable to do something like that. And you could see that. That's why Megyn Kelly, I didn't expect her to be, such a stalwart on this thing. And she was like, no, he was definitely going through something towards the end because he died. And that normal spiritual thing came on where Megyn was like, hey, these lies are actually I'm not okay with it. And I want to make sure the truth gets out there. And so it did present an opportunity for people to see that we're not being dramatic when we say that these people are evil. Like, that is an evil to do that to your quote unquote friend, to lie about him because you want to protect your identity as a pro-Israel psychopath, which is kind of what he is. He's a pro-Israel psychopath. There's not no other way to say it. Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I should go out of my way, as you said, that just to give some credit to Megyn Kelly, because she has been really solid on this. And obviously, like, there's I've always liked Megyn, and I've done her show a few times. And I've always liked her. There's always a lot of issues I disagree with her about, I'm sure, but just like having the basic principle of being like, no, I'm not going along with this like mob and saying I'm supposed to now throw my friends under the bus and pretend. It's this whole thing where we're supposed to pretend the people who were like everybody loved 5 minutes ago are now just like, possessed by evil almost. I thought it was so funny listening to Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham at this Genocide Fest 2025, where they're like, like if you were to hear them talk about it, it's like
dude, just I guess everybody just got possessed by Israel hatred over the last couple of years, and nothing else was going on in the news with Israel, Candace. It's just that I don't know. So everybody just kind of there. I guess Qatar must have sent a lot of money around, and then everybody it was just all all that's what happened is that like all these people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and all the people who have been household names now for many, many years, who is very successful at the top of the conservative, most popular like commentators. They all just sold out their soul for Qatari money and just and everyone and their whole audience is possessed by it too. And nothing. And then they just leave out that part where like you guys committed a genocide in 4K and forced us to pay for it. Like, you don't think that had a little bit to do with this? You don't think that had something to do with where we're at today? And this like, so one of the things, this is what I was getting at before, because Charlie was a movement guy. Charlie was a big tent guy. Charlie was a guy who wanted to find a way for us to not lose to like the crazy progressive leftists. And you've heard this brought up a lot by Mark Levin and by Ben Shapiro and people like that over this last week. We just had an election. The Democrats had a good night. You go, look, there's this infighting on the right. And so if we keep doing this, we're going to end up losing and AOC is going to be president or something like that. Now, of course, they just take it as a given that like, I guess we're just supposed to shut up and they get their way. Is, like, why is that the way it works? But at a certain point, I actually think in a sense, they're right about that one argument. And Charlie was right to like be concerned about this. But here's the thing, right? And you being number one, and you and Tucker are the biggest two. You're the biggest two conservative people in the news. And like, then as Charlie noted, as Megyn Kelly's noted, nobody under 30 supports Israel anymore. Barely anyone under 40 supports Israel anymore. It is essentially my point is that you're right. If we fracture up this coalition, we'll end up losing to the Democrats. But the only way to overcome that and win is to obviously go with the wind. It's like it's like saying in 2016, hey, there's a big divide between Donald Trump and the entire GOP establishment on immigration. They want open borders and he wants to build a wall. And it's like, yes, but you've got him and 100% of the base against you. So the only option here is to go with his immigration policy, and then you could win the election. And I do think this all comes down to the war party and to Israel, which are kind of, one and the same in this country. And it's like, JD Vance, you can embrace that and lose, or you can come over here with the people and have a real shot of winning. What do you want to do?
And look, we have the Republican Party, we have a Democrat Party, and then we have the Knesset Party, and they've infiltrated both of the parties actually. And what's happening right now is left and right. People are saying no to that. The reasons might be different, but it's a populist movement one way or the other. Right. And it's hilarious to me that they think after me watching Charlie Kirk get assassinated, them spitting in our face and telling us that it's raining about everything that happened here. The viciousness that they themselves directed toward me in the aftermath. I mean, if people are like, they tried to say that I didn't even like know Charlie. I mean, they were so intent on making sure that not one drop of Candace being anti-Israel was a part of his legacy, that they just lied. They lied in a way that for the grief that I was going through, like, I'm not a crier. I mean, it was a lot. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. It was a lot for me to go through. And I look back and I'm like, wow, the nastiness of them doing this. And then like a couple of weeks later being like, and now we demand you tell your audience to go vote for who we want them to vote for.
Yeah.
F you. F you. I am not doing anything. Okay. Here's the way it works. And here's how common sense is. Okay. You tell me I can do this job. I can build your house. I can do this. I hire you. Okay. I get behind it. I say, okay, I hire you. Go do that job. You then don't do it. You look at me and you say, Epstein who? Okay. Like you're at the top of the FBI and you say, oh, these are the real messages. You're blocking people, as Kash Patel is, from looking into Tulsi's team and Joe Kent. You saw this playing out in the news. They won't even let them look into whether or not foreign people could have been involved in this. And then you're like, and now go get out more people to vote so that we stay in power. No, buddy. Okay. In your famous words, you're fired as far as I'm concerned. Okay. And so I don't know what's around the corner, but I do know that my platform is not yours. Okay. My platform belongs to the truth, left and right. Okay. And so it was just incredible to me. They were like, and not even that, they were like, get out people and tell them to vote against Mamdani and to like, get behind interim. Okay, if you want to do that, that's your thing. But I'm telling you, I'm not doing anything because for me, political life stopped when Charlie Kirk was murdered and you wanted me to move on. I'm not moving on from it.
Yeah.
By the way, it wasn't because of Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson sitting down that MAGA got splintered. It got splintered when you said Epstein who? That's it. Literally for me on my show, when I said, okay, what is this? Did the Loch Ness swamp monster come up and swallow the MAGA party? Actually, who is the Loch Ness monster? I think it's Israel. Okay. I think it's Israel, actually.
Such a good point.
And if Trump suddenly joined the Never Trump party, which he did, right? Trump joined the Never Trump movement. That's what's happening right now. And now they're trying to tell us to join it. I'm good. I've always been against the Never Trumpers, and I'm going to stay that way, even if Trump has joined them.
Yeah. Well, that's such an important point. And so but I just real quick before I get to that, I just do want to say, and I made this point last night. I was on my buddy Clint Russell's podcast, Liberty Lockdown. Oh, Clint Russell, by the way, criminally underrated. He's great. So it was me, him, and Ian Carroll. And we did.
Yeah, it was trending. You guys were trending.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was a great show. I think I bowled over everyone. I talked too much on the show. I apologized for it afterward, and I was like, I bet I'm going to get shit in the comments for this, and I did today. So sorry about that, guys. It was late. I'd had a couple whiskeys. I was ranting a bit, but it was a great show, and you should go subscribe to Clint Russell's channel if you get a chance. But I said this to them on that show, and I wanted to just make sure I say this again while you're on my show. That look, I don't know everything about everyone here, but one thing I do know is over this last year, I mean, me and you have become friends over the last couple years. Me and Charlie became friends over this last year from hanging out with both of you. And I remember talking to you because, we'd all talk about all this stuff. And I remember talking to you about Charlie years ago when we were hanging out. And you were just had nothing. You were like, Charlie's the greatest guy. Just had nothing but like, I love him to death. He's the greatest guy ever. And I talked to Charlie about you briefly when we were down at the Student Action Summit, whatever the big event where me and Tucker and Megan were. And literally just all he had to say was how much he adored and loved you. Like, so the idea of people going like, there was this distance that had been growing between, like, okay, actually, I know both of them. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That's just a fact. And I genuinely challenge anybody in Charlie's inner circle, tell me the wrong. Even, I swear, even Josh Hammer wouldn't have the goddamn balls. Maybe he would, but he's lying. So that's one thing. But then on this other thing, it's very interesting. And, that you're absolutely right that it really was the Epstein thing. I said this at the time, too, that people do not understand how profound what he's done here is to, and it may not even show up in a poll. His numbers did go down after that, but I'm not sure the polls can, because a lot of people who support Donald Trump, they supported him, they voted for him. If you asked them, they'd probably still say, do you support Donald Trump? Yeah, I'm a Trump guy. I'm not a Kamala Harris Democrat or something. But the energy and the loyalty and the enthusiasm were just tremendously degraded by him. It's the whole political raison d'etre of Donald Trump was to drain the swamp. And this is the swampiest of the swamp, a pedophile ring connected to government and foreign intelligence assets. Like, come on. And I will say, weirdly, that at that event, which it was a thing that in a way I think saved me, because Josh Hammer, which was somewhat crafty of him, because it's the best he's going to do debating me. But so what he did for the whole opening of his statement was, like I'm a me, so I get up there and I'm like, the neoconservatives were a marriage of the Israeli lobby and the military industrial complex, and their clean break strategy is what we embarked on after 9/11, and this is the war in Iran. It's the culmination of the 7 countries in 5 years and all this shit. And then his whole opening statement is just every nasty thing I've ever said about Donald Trump. And just look, hey, Charlie Kirk, Turning Point audience, we love Trump. How about this guy? He don't love Trump. And which is a powerful way to win over an argument. I mean, it's a lame and dishonorable way to do it, but it is how politics works. You get these people like, well, what do you want to be? You want to be a leftist Kamala Harris supporter? You go, oh, no, we're not that. Okay, we'll be the other thing. And then I just went, yeah, I'm talking about the guy who just covered up the Epstein story. Sorry, I'm going to criticize that guy. And the whole crowd was back with me because there was something about that moment. I had this experience recently where I did Steven Crowder's podcast. And that's all, we had this debate. All he tried to argue with was, you called for impeaching Donald Trump. You said Donald Trump's a war criminal. And then someone showed me the other day, go look through the YouTube comments. Everybody's like, everyone's like, nah, like it's kind of like, Look, the Trump loyalty thing is played out. They are public servants. They work for us. I'm loyal to God. Yeah, I'm loyal to God. I'm loyal to my wife. I'm loyal to my friends. I'm not loyal to an administration.
No.
And to your point, it's like, this is not, and JD Vance or whoever it is not going to have that type of loyalty from a lot of us either. Like, you got to deliver on what we want. Like,
right.
and what we want is not bombing Iran and threatening to overthrow Venezuela.
We didn't want war, and we were totally fine. Like the pro-Israel, he's always been pro-Israel, but it wasn't a relevant topic in the way that it is today. Like, are you going to stand up when Bibi Netanyahu says that he immediately wants your bombers to go take out, and like you just go do it, and you were going to do more if Charlie Kirk didn't stop it? You were actually going to do more. That seems pretty corrupt to us. Like the way that Bibi Netanyahu is just on camera being like, "We're going to take over. I need this deal to go through with TikTok. and you're not saying anything. You were supposed to be the free speech enthusiast, and you're going after college kids. You got Pam Bondi, who's like blanking us on Jeffrey Epstein, but responding to like a kid that gets shoved by a girl on a college campus. He's wearing an IDF, so he's basically like wearing an IDF shirt, asking for it, and a girl gives him a little shove, and it requires Randy Fine and Pam Bondi to respond within minutes. You can't figure out the Epstein thing, but we've got like literally an Amber Alert. The feds are like able to answer quick. Like, I'm sorry, this is a joke. This is not what I voted for, and you're not going to struggle sashing me into they're like using the ghost of Charlie Kirk. This is what Charlie would want. This is what Charlie would want. It's like, was I born yesterday? I don't know, but all I know is that I don't care what happens. You're going to have to work for our vote. When we elect you, we're electing you for a certain job. You don't deliver on that job. Joke's on you. And I think right now the Trump family is feeling that. You see that they are, I think, probably now in retrospect realizing how significant Charlie Kirk was, because he was damning that, right? Because everyone, even if you disagreed with him, people would play his clips. There was a level of respect that people had for Charlie Kirk because they sensed his authenticity. He was authentic, and you would sense that he would get stressed when he was being pressed not to be authentic. And that's now removed. And all we have are these puppets. And I'm including Trump amongst this. He has let his base down, and stop blaming Nick Fuentes. Okay. I'm not a Nick Fuentes fan. Why can't Nick Fuentes have a platform? Why can't he have a conversation? Why can't he talk to Dave Smith and Tucker? The free market works like this, by the way. Okay. If his ideas suck, then Nick Fuentes will be beaten the free markets. I don't need Nick Fuentes censored. I need you to actually deliver on your promises so that Nick Fuentes he wouldn't have a platform unless you guys were lying about something, right? Like you're lying about something where people feel like they're not getting the truth from this person, and they're going and they're listening to more of Nick Fuentes. They sense that you're a liar. And so stop talking to me about this is Nick Fuentes' the grapers, the anonymous frogs in the internet. This is their fault. No, this is your fault for not delivering on your promises. And one of those big promises was to protect speech. Okay. And we see what you're doing, redefining anti-Semitism on college campuses. Get out of my face.
Buddy, welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I'm very excited for this one. One of the cool things about doing what I do is I get to meet and talk to a lot of people who I really admire, who I've learned a lot from. And today's episode is a great example of that. Our guest today is Max Blumenthal, who is just one of the best authors and journalists out there. I highly recommend his stuff. His book, Goliath, is one of the best books I've ever read on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And of course, The Gray Zone, where he is a reporter and the founder, has done some of the absolute best reporting over the last 2 years on the Gaza stuff. Just really invaluable work, and particularly to me personally, I mean, I've really benefited from the work they've done. So thank you so much, Max, for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for that warm introduction. I hope I can live up to it. And thanks for all the interventions that you've made since October 7th.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a wild time. So I want to get into a lot of the Charlie Kirk stuff that you've been reporting on lately, but I got to ask you, just because I have you here and we're recording a day earlier, the show will be coming out on Monday, but today, Sunday, this morning, the Prime Minister of the UK announced their desire to see a Palestinian state, and then the government of Israel put out a statement about how they don't recognize this recognition. I'm just curious, because you understand this better than I do. What do you think is the significance of this? I mean, obviously, a Palestinian state will not be, we're not about to realize that anytime soon. And in fact, the destruction of Gaza continues as we speak. But how significant of a moment is this, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think it would be more significant if the European Football Association banned Israel. And it would actually have a material value if the UK and the EU got together and pressured Germany to stop all weapons shipments to Israel. That would actually possibly upend the genocide and save lives. What they're doing here is a hollow gesture to do something. It will have some diplomatic value because it will provide the Palestinian Authority with more of a voice at the UN, but it's the same Palestinian Authority that collaborates on the ground with the Israeli military. There is no Palestinian state on the ground. The West Bank now is a prison. All the cities are completely surrounded by military and settlers and military behind the settlers. And it's impossible for people in the West Bank to travel between Palestinian people, to travel between their own cities in what's known as Area A. So I don't know where this Palestinian state would be. There have been record new settlement authorizations in the West Bank. And of course, we see Israel right now, as we speak, is destroying Gaza City, which is the administrative, cultural, and governmental base of Gaza. So Gaza would have been part of a Palestinian state. But then again, how would people from the Gaza Strip get to the West Bank? And then where's East Jerusalem in this? Israel has cut off E1, which is a corridor of settlements. They're constructing in this corridor called E1. I've visited it multiple times, and it basically encircles East Jerusalem from the west. So it cuts it off from the Palestinian West Bank, and then you have the apartheid wall, which cuts that off. So like there is no possibility under what Israel has done of a Palestinian state at this moment. So it's a hollow gesture. And then what is the enforcement mechanism? Like, how can you tell the Israelis, you must allow people from East Jerusalem to go to the West Bank? They're all part of this state. They all have to be together. You must give them borders. The enforcement mechanism is what BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, was created for, which is to pressure Israel. And this is something, the S is for sanctions. So the governments could just sanction the crap out of Israel until they allow Palestinians to live as citizens in their own state. But they're not going to do that because of the internal political pressure they face in the UK from the Israel lobby, which helped get Keir Starmer to where he is, which destroyed Jeremy Corbyn, who would have actually potentially tried to enforce a Palestinian state. So what really needs to happen right now, what we need to be focused on, is saving lives. And lives can only be saved by cutting off all weapons to Israel and sanctioning Israel. Then this all ends. Then we can talk about, diplomatic paths forward. I personally favor a binational state where everyone has equal rights. But right now, we're witnessing a genocide. It's a Holocaust, and we just need to stop it. And this will not stop it. Then there's one last point to your question. This does elucidate the reality of Israel that I presented in my book, Goliath, which I know you read. Mm-hmm. And it's an Israel where there is no one, maybe a few hundred people who actually support a Palestinian state. So everyone says the problem is Netanyahu, big bad Bibi. He's always been against a Palestinian state. He has guaranteed his supporters that he will prevent a Palestinian state. But where's the furthest? Who is the figure furthest to the left of Netanyahu who still has a voice in Israeli politics? His name is Yair Golan. He comes out of, actually, I think, the Meretz party, but he has been a ferocious militarist and supporter of the genocide in Gaza. And he just issued a statement condemning the recognition of a Palestinian state. There's no one in Israeli politics who supports a Palestinian state. And even if they did, they wouldn't support it along 67 borders. So we have to deal with Israel as it is.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is The Wellness Company. We've all heard the studies. Testosterone in young men is drastically decreasing every decade. One major study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found a healthy 22-year-old in 2000 had double the testosterone of a 22-year-old in 2025. So if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you might want to check this out. Mars from the Wellness Company, a doctor formulated nutraceutical designed to restore vitality without synthetic hormones or stimulants. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, all of that very good points. I think that, I was always, well, after kind of waking up to the nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I always thought of myself as a two-state solution guy. It just seemed to me to be more like of a practical sell. That, look, the Israelis are never going to accept one state because they think that means they lose their entire identity as a Jewish state. So it's an easier sell to just convince people, okay, but you can't occupy them. You got to give them their own sovereignty. And a couple of the things that have made me really re-question that, and as you said there, you think that one democratic state is a better goal to push for. Number one was when I was reading about the mindset of the Israeli leadership class around the 2005 disengagement from Gaza, and it really was the thing that spooked them, was when the Gaza leadership started pushing for a one-state solution rather than a two-state solution, because they just like that. And so that just got to me. It was like, oh, if that's what they're afraid of, then maybe that makes sense. But the other thing is really what you were getting at there, that there's just been so many. I mean, the purpose of all of these actions have been to make it impossible to ever have a two-state solution. And we're now, if you think back to like Camp David or something like that, well, it's 25 years later, and it's 25 years of putting poison pills and roadblocks in the way of even like the framework of what a two-state solution potentially during Oslo could have been. And so it does seem like the logical conclusion from that is that you're never going to get that, and the best case is to push for one state. And it is, I got to say, I'm sure you agree with me on this, but like when one of the funniest moments in American politics over the last year certainly was during that debate for the New York City mayoral Democratic primary, where they tried to, it's like how upside down the world is, that their big gotcha of Mamdani was that he said he favors one state with equal rights for all. And somehow, Max, you're supposed to hear that as like a Hitlerian statement of some kind, like equal rights, this monster. And so it does seem like maybe that's just the best thing to push for.
Yeah, I mean, and you had like black New York politicians on stage recognizing an ethno-supremacist apartheid state and attacking him for it. It's kind of like an upside down world. And one state solution, or a binational state where everyone has equality under the law, actually does represent a dismantlement of the exclusivist Jewish state. And that's not a problem with a one state solution. It shows what the problem with the so-called Jewish state is, which is that it's an ethno-supremacist state that provides no rights to the indigenous people who actually represent a majority between the river and the sea, who have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years longer than the Jewish settler class. Zionism must be dismantled in order for peace to take root. And until that takes place, we will witness a continuous state of warfare and untold horrors like we have never seen, including waking up every day to see children who Israel defines, because they're not Jewish, as demographic threats being shredded day after day. This isn't also because Israel is, because of the Jewishness of the Israeli state. It's because of the ethno-supremacist character. We had the same problem with apartheid South Africa. We had the same problem with the United States when it was a settler state, which is that until it can ethnically cleanse the indigenous population or crush their resistance, as they tried to do in South Africa, they cannot consolidate the state as a so-called democracy.
Yeah.
And this is why we see like leadership rising in Israel, like Itamar Ben-Gvir or Bezalel Smotrich, but especially Ben-Gvir, because Ben-Gvir said something that he believes something that I actually agree with from another angle that's fundamental to his worldview. And this comes from his mentor, Meir Kahane, who really is, I think, the most towering figure in Israel today. We can talk about who he is, or you can just look him up. It's spelled Kahane. And what he said, what Kahane said and what Ben-Gvir says is, you simply cannot have a Jewish and democratic state, which is Israel's selling point to the world. You have to choose, because if you're democratic, you're eventually going to let the Palestinians vote, and they're going to vote in their own politicians and eventually their own prime minister, because they're growing. They're a demographic threat. And so we have to consolidate the Jewishness by eliminating them. And that's what Israel's decided to do in the Gaza Strip. And they're carrying out a Holocaust. I mean, they're openly saying it, that they're trying to push the population out of their homes by blowing their homes up and then driving them into Egypt. That is, so what we're witnessing is the fundamental logic of Zionism playing out in real time.
Yeah. And well, this is what Benny Morris, I think, was saying all those years ago when he was telling the truth. And he said that transfer was always, I forget his exact words, that it was always inherent in the Zionist project. But obviously, yeah, you can only be like, it's, I think, always been the true nature of the Israeli experiment, right? Is that like they want to pay lip service to being a democracy. But the thing is, if you have these two values that are being a Jewish state and being a democracy, well, you can only achieve both of those if you're willing to ethnically cleanse the population. If you're building a state on Arab land, then you have to work out the numbers to be so that it's been around 80-20 for most of Israel's existence, because they moved the rest of the Arabs out and keep them out. And so there it is. Like, you can kind of be one or the other. And it's been, at this point, so like ingrained in their own conception of themselves, and also in their selling message to the rest of the world is, oh, we're the only democracy in the Middle East. And so in order to be able to say that, they have to keep this amount of pressure. I always think back to, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it really is fascinating. If you've ever read, I'm sure you have, but if you ever read the write-up on the Israel-Palestine, or on the Zionist question in the King Crane Commission after World War I, or they basically, it's not exactly perfect, but they basically get it completely right. They go, man, I mean, this idea of building a Jewish state here is going to take an enormous amount of force to create and maintain. And there's just no way you're going to do this without having a permanent state of war where the Arabs are your enemies indefinitely. And it's like, damn, if that wasn't pretty impressive to think of that in the aftermath of World War I. I mean, but I guess if you're over there, that was just the reality on the ground.
Yeah. And it was at a time of high colonialism around the world. So there were the great powers would have been supportive of this. They just wanted to be in control. And that's why the Zionist movement launched a terrorist campaign against the British Mandate authorities. But one of I think one of the other major intellectual forces who looms large in Israel today, who employed Netanyahu's father, Benjamin Milikowski, in New York, was Zev Jabotinsky, the father of revisionist Zionism. And if you read his seminal essay, The Iron Wall, which Israel's first prime minister, who was a labor Zionist, sort of more socialist-oriented Zionist, actually adopted, what Jabotinsky openly says in that essay is the native population has always resisted colonialism. Just look at what's happening in Africa. Look at the Native Americans. The Palestinian, he didn't call them Palestinians, but the Arabs will resist us as well. And the only way that we can build a Jewish state is with an iron wall of bullets and bayonets. And so many Israeli leaders, Moshe Dayan, for example, in a famous speech at the Gaza border in 1953, said the same thing. Moshe Dayan said, we cannot plow a field or build a home without the steel helmet or the automatic cannon. So this is just a straightforward colonial mentality, and it's playing out at a time when of post-colonialism throughout the world, when post-colonial countries like China are rising to global superpower status. So Israel's completely anachronistic, and they're wondering why everyone is disgusted by what they're doing. Everyone hates them, and it's because they belong to another much worse era. And the only thing holding them up is Washington and its continuous supply, its air bridge of baby buster bombs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is why the kind of the control of the American propaganda machine has always been so important to the Zionist cause, because that's really what it comes down to. And so maybe that's a good transition into what we were going to talk about today, which of course is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the reporting that you've done since then on what exactly the relationship between Charlie Kirk and the Israeli government and the broader kind of Israel lobby and Zionist influencer class. And this is a very interesting topic to me. I was somewhat involved in a lot of these, in the center of what the controversy was about, although I do think it was more about Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly than it was about me. But so, it seemed like that did. Although, I think for a while, there were a lot of people who were actually pretty pissed off about me being there. And I think in some ways, because I'm not nearly as big a name, particularly in like right wing or like Republican turning point type events, but I'm not nearly as big a high profile figure as Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly. And so me being there, I always thought was it demonstrated more of a choice on Charlie's part. Like, he didn't have to have me there. Whereas like Tucker Carlson, I mean, if you can get him at Turning Point USA, how are you not going to have the biggest right-wing voice in America there? But anyway, let me ask you like the broadest of questions that you could kind of take in whatever direction you want to. With the whole Charlie Kirk thing and the reporting that you've been doing on it, where are you right now? Like, what do you think the story is here? What do you think is important for people to understand about this?
Well, I'm working on a news story, and it's pretty much along the same lines as all the other stories I've been reporting, which is that, in the days and weeks before his death, Charlie Kirk was facing not just increasing Zionist pressure as the date approached of his first appearance on his campus-wide cross-country tour, but that actually he was bleeding Zionist donations. And I got the name of a major donor who apparently pulled out. I haven't dropped the piece yet, so I don't want to sell it out, but I just got him on the phone and he hung up on me when I asked him about it. So it seems like there's a there. And that they were pretty upset at Charlie Kirk because there's no space for allowing comic Dave Smith on stage for debate. There's no space for debate on this issue. It doesn't matter what the purpose of the debate is. There's no, it's like how they say there should be no daylight between the United States and Israel. Charlie Kirk was allowing daylight.
Right.
Everything I reported is backed up by public statements by Charlie Kirk and now by someone who had positioned himself as his personal Israeli handler. It's a guy named Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's from a group called Israel 365 Action, which is apparently funded by the Falak family of Duty Free America, who sponsored the settlement, illegal settlement enterprise in the West Bank, real hardliners. He's also close to Regent University, which is funded by Pat Robertson. He's one of these rabbis that like his job is to groom Christians in the United States to support Israel and to support them as much as possible. I got some documents that his group had been sending to conservative influencers, offering them like free tours of Israel, biblical sites, going to Gaza, the Gaza border, etc. And he actually has given a series of interviews where he said that he was talking to Charlie Kirk almost every day leading up to his tour and giving him talking points, and that they were kind of having there was a running argument, and that Charlie Kirk, he said, was believing a lot of things he heard in the media, and that there were people close to him who were pushing him to be more anti-Israel, and that they spoke like almost like the day before his Utah Valley University fateful speech where he was horrifically killed. There were also all these Zoom meetings leading up to Charlie Kirk's final days that I learned about, including with Joshua Hammer, this really charismatic figure that you debated. I don't know how you stood up to that. Just blizzard of facts. But he's one of Netanyahu's young voices in the media, a Newsweek editor. Sean McGuire, who's emerging as sort of like this junior Bill Ackman figure, who's a venture capitalist, very close to Elon. owns a house in Israel. He was on the Zoom call. He actually deleted a tweet where he mentioned the Zoom call, which is interesting. So Charlie Kirk was just under constant pressure. And just imagine having like this cabal of representing a sort of niche movement that is giving you enormous amounts of money and offering you more in order to say what they want, just constantly calling you. Rabbi Wolicki said they were planning to set up a WhatsApp group to feed Charlie talking points throughout his tour. And they said they were very worried because people were asking him about Gaza and the genocide, and they didn't want him to go off script. But just imagine having those people in your ear all the time, just constantly managing you. And that's what this Hamptons influencer retreat was as well, that I had exposed. I broke that story. I mean, there were a lot of people there were rumors going around about it. And Bill Ackman, who's one of the biggest pro-Netanyahu money men in the country, this investor who's worth $9 billion, sort of convened the meeting in coordination with Charlie Kirk and what Ackman's agenda was there. And I think there was a larger agenda with deeper forces that were sort of embedding themselves into TPUSA as entities like the Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire failed. What they wanted to do is basically buy impressions for Israel. So they were cultivating all of these young influencers to go to Israel, to say whatever Israel wanted. I mean, just go to the Instagram page right now of Xavier DeRousseau of PragerU, which is like an Israeli, I consider it basically an Israeli cutout. Like Marissa Straight, who runs that, is a veteran of Israel's cyber spying division, Unit 8200. And she's supposed to be like creating the next generation of America first. But go to this guy's Instagram page, like every subject. This is a young Black man from Louisiana. Every subject is like Zionism, Israel. It's obvious what he's doing. He's like a paid actor. He's a talented paid actor. He's a paid actor for these Zionist billionaires. And so they were trying to groom more and like bring in like attractive women, anything that will keep the looming collapse of Israel's standing within the conservative movement from finally taking place. And where Charlie Kirk was not where we are. He was sort of, I mean, I look at him and I've been following him for 10 years. He's like a natural born political operative. And all he thinks about is politics and votes and getting out the vote in districts and networking, doing media. He's very good at it. I don't agree with anything he said, but he's good at that. And all of a sudden there's this grassroots revolt among young conservatives on Israel, and he faces the Groyper wars, and nobody's like, very few of them support it except for the Jewish conservatives, who are like only 7 or 8% of American Jews even vote Republican. So they're in the minority, but they have more money than, I mean, they command billions of dollars. So he has to answer to them and the conservative grassroots at the same time. And he's stuck in the middle in an impossible position, and he couldn't bridge the divide. And, you know, he's constantly on camera too. And sometimes he would just go off script and start saying the things he would hear from his friends and the things he was feeling. And he may have actually been disgusted by what he was seeing in Gaza. He certainly was opposed to the Iran war. And, you know, my reporting that he was actually going up in the White House and lobbying Trump and others against attacking Iran, which it was like totally forbidden, has been corroborated by J.D. Vance himself. What really seemed to upset Charlie Kirk wasn't, though, like maybe the same things that upset us about this issue. It was that this coterie or cabal of billionaires who really seem only concerned with the fate of a foreign country was telling him what to do in his own country when he was supposed to be the face and voice of America first. And that was driving him crazy in his final days. So look at the reaction right now. I mean, look at the reaction. Candace Owens went live like a half hour after I dropped my piece and provided additional details and gave, you know, a really stirring narrative about the influencer summit based on what she knew. And she is the target of like a tsunami of attacks, all from those very same forces. They're trying to totally destroy her. They're trying to like wipe her off the map the same way they're wiping Gaza off the map. They're overreacting because they can see the writing on the wall. Candace Owens, look at her engagement. I mean, hundreds of thousands of views when she goes live, then millions and millions more. Everyone's the conservative youth, but the whole, like, young people across the country are hanging on her every word. Nobody cares what Ben Shapiro has to say.
Yep.
It's all fake.
Yeah, well, I think that, as I've been saying for a while, I mean, I was talking about this. I did a whole show on this after I did that debate because it was such a fascinating dynamic to me. But the thing you could see was that really what separates Charlie Kirk from Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or Dave Rubin or any of these other guys was that he had to keep dealing with the young people. Like that was his whole job. And not just that he had to deal with them, but he had to keep young activists on board to volunteer. These are like the true believers, in a cause. These aren't, grand operatives. And you got to do this with a demographic where support for it. I mean, it's like, I don't know what other thing I could even compare it to. I think maybe for people who are a little bit younger, maybe you can't appreciate this because things have changed so much with like the rise of wokeism and the LGBTQ stuff. But like gay marriage, I guess I kind of, for like a while in the country, gay marriage was kind of a controversial issue. And then the pro-gay marriage side just won out. Like it just went from being like a divisive 50-50 issue to being an issue where it was like 80-20. It was like everyone's just like, dude, no one cares. Like let gay people get married. Who cares? And no, that may have changed after, the decade that followed. But, it's an issue where like young people, I mean, Megyn Kelly herself said the other day, she went, no one under 30 supports Israel. Like it's basically, it just does. So he's in this terrible place. And his whole job, like you said, is to keep the big tent going, the big tent that can win in November. But there is no tent big enough if it doesn't include Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. I mean, like if you have to, it's one thing for him to say, I have to exclude Nick Fuentes, but to have to exclude Tucker Carlson, well, then where's the tent? There is no tent left. People like Ben Shapiro, he's removed. He's in his studio. He's still got, his backers and his operation. He doesn't have to necessarily engage with the fact that, say, on Twitter, everybody's calling him out for what the obvious, the foreign spy that he is. But Charlie Kirk had to go to these events. Yeah. So he had to find a way. And I think you could see it all over him. And I don't mean this, I'm not adding anything. I told you, I gave the audience the information I had, which is just that basically he told me, we don't actually disagree that much on this topic. But I could see, everyone could see in his public appearances, the struggle in this dynamic. And then it became this thing that like, it reinforced itself. So he would go, okay, well, I got to keep this together somehow. Maybe I moderate a debate on the subject. Then I can still present myself to my young activists as I'm the guy who's willing to have this debate.
Right.
But to the Zionist donors, that was way too far. And so now they're furious at him. And as you know well, Max, I'm sure you experienced this quite a bit in your career. I've experienced this quite a bit myself. There is some personality trait or characteristic to the ultra hardcore Zionists that for whatever reason, when you start drifting a little bit, they don't go, hey, I get your point and I see why you're asking these questions and this sure is a complicated issue. Let's come back here. When you start drifting this much, they go, you're Adolf Hitler.
Yep.
And you go, wait, what? I'm Adolf Hitler? Like, no, I'm like just drifting. And then it just has this effect of pushing a lot of people further and further. It pushes some of them to say, you know what, I am Adolf Hitler, which I don't think is the best response. But it just, and you could see Charlie was dealing with that already. It's one of the things that really backs up your reporting, I think, that really, because Bill Ackman's coming out going, no, what are you talking about? Josh Hammer, all these guys. It was the friendliest of meetings.
Yeah, right.
It's like, okay, well, 48 hours later or something like that, he's on with Megyn Kelly. And like, it doesn't seem like that's the vibe that he's describing,
Yeah, you should, edit in that clip right now just to illustrate your point. I mean, he was complaining about stakeholders and donors giving him less space to criticize Israel than Israelis. And he seemed just visibly agonized. This is, what Charlie Kirk is dealing with is he's a Protestant coming from a very different cultural environment than a lot of the Jewish Likudniks he was dealing with. And what they deal with is like when they're kids, if they start to question Israel, they get smacked down so hard in their own families. I was lucky, like at least my nuclear family, they're not Zionists, and they understood why I was disgusted by the whole thing. So I never faced that. And there's just it's a different culture when you grow up in like this hermetically sealed communal Jewish world. There's no space on the Israel issue unless you're like ultra Orthodox and Satmar. And so they projected that onto Charlie Kirk. And he was, from what I heard from people who knew him, was he was shocked by the way that they would speak to him, just by the rudeness of it. But that's the way they were spoken to about the issue. Yeah. And their entire identity focuses around this one pillar because, you're American, you're Jewish, it's a secular society. You're a minority, very easy to intermarry, but there's always this Israel. And that's something that you can just easily wave an Israeli flag and denounce the Palestinians, and you'll be recognized by your community as a good Jew. And if you give a lot of money, you can actually be considered a macher, like a big guy. So that's how they saw it. And I don't think Charlie Kirk fully understood that. So he was getting alienated by them. I mean, there were also these rumors that he was converting to Catholicism. Now, what I do know is he was attending, or what I have heard from people who even were in this Catholic church, was that I believe it was in Phoenix, he was actually attending Catholic Mass, or he had attended Catholic Mass. So we can kind of leave it there. But if he had converted to Catholicism, that would have been a big blow to Zionism as well, because you're basically abandoning Christian Zionism and this concept of Israel as covenant land, the idea of the Jews as a chosen people to fulfill various dispensations in order to reach the day of revelation. I mean, it's all gone. So they're threatened by that. There's a lot of attacks on Candace Owens for mentioning that. But this seems to have been a reality that he was dealing with, and we'll never know where he would have landed and how it would have ended up. But had he landed in a different place, he would have lost a lot of money. And I've been hearing from a number of people I never thought I would ever meet in my life on the right, who are in right-wing media, who were kind of moved by what I wrote because it resonated with them because they were having a similar experience where they're working in right-wing or Trump-adjacent media organizations, and everything's going fine. And then all of a sudden they start questioning Israel, and their boss starts freaking out, either because the boss themselves is afraid or because the boss themselves is a Zionist. And then they realize there's someone in the office who just seems to only represent Israel, and they don't know why they're there. And, one person I can point to, just because this is played out publicly, is Tim Pool. I'm sure you've been on his show. I've been on his show. Like, I found him, I was on his show like right after October 7th, and he was pretty open-minded about the whole thing. He let me speak my mind. I didn't really feel like I was being shut down. And he gets an invitation to meet with Netanyahu, I believe, in the first of the 4 trips that Netanyahu took in recent months. And they meet at Blair House outside the White House. There's a small group of conservative influencers, and it's Chatham House rules. No one's allowed to come out of that meeting with any details. You're not allowed to say what happened. And you're meeting with someone who's like involved in the worst war crimes we have ever witnessed, who's presiding over a Holocaust. And you're not allowed to ask a tough question. And then Tim Pool goes back to his studio, and no one's supposed to ask him about it. But I think someone did ask him about it on air. And like, you could see he was like a deer in the headlights. And that, so basically when you get involved in conservative media, you don't know it, but you can't really, almost no one can question this because of where the money is coming from. And if you actually get involved directly, like you start going to these influencer summits with Bill Ackman, and then you take the trip to Israel and you kiss the wall and all that, it's like joining the Firm. The Firm, the early 90s book by John Grisham, where it's like you get in a law firm, and if you leave, you learn certain secrets, and if you leave, it doesn't work out too well for you. And Charlie Kirk was in the firm.
Dude, what happens? I got to ask you, right? Because like I have somewhat famously never been to Israel. After that, I did get the invite, which I turned down. I was told this came from the top, that I was invited there. And I was like, no, I'm not going. I don't know what it is you guys do and what these you have to come to Israel trips are, but I'm not going over there. I'm not doing any of this. I've read too much about this, and I don't want to go take a picture crying in front of your wall. And I don't want to come back to my hotel and find 3 people are already inside it, or like things have been rearranged to intimidate me. Like, no, I'm not doing this. But from your understanding, and you've been there many times, what is it that they do to these guys on these trips? Why do they always want people to come to Israel? And what is it that happens on these trips?
Well, first, this is our first time talking, so I would really urge you to go. Just fly in there, fly to Ben Gurion International Airport, get out and just see it as a tourist, and then go to Jerusalem, go to East Jerusalem, see how Palestinians live. You can just walk right in there. And I can tell you what bus to take from there for $2 into Ramallah, and you'll go through the apartheid wall, and then you'll be in occupied Palestinian territory, and you can just see it all for yourself. And I really recommend everyone do that. And there are various ways to make contact with local activists and NGOs, even Breaking the Silence, the former Israeli soldiers, NGO will take you on a tour of occupied Hebron in the West Bank and show you what they had to do there as soldiers. And I think that's all you really need to see to understand apartheid, is to go to H2 in Hebron, which is an entire part of a Palestinian city that has been sectioned off for some of the most fanatical genocidal settlers. And Shahada Street, which goes through the middle of H2, is a Jews only street. There are actually signs that tell you where Palestinians can walk and where Jews can walk. And you can go there and see that yourself. And you can talk to the soldiers who are there on duty. And they don't actually many of them don't like the settlers, and they're really bored and annoyed by the whole thing, but they're just following orders to participate in this genocidal project. So I think it's like, once you see that and you see apartheid for yourself, it really does give you an important authority that I think someone with your communication gifts should get. So if there's any way I can help, let me know. And everyone watching this, you should be encouraged to do that. Those who go on the AIPAC trips, which all freshman members of Congress get invited on, do not have that experience. And I personally had a similar experience because I went on Birthright Israel when I was much younger and was just starting to explore this issue, and I would characterize my mentality at that point in my life when I was 22 years old as liberal Zionist. After returning, I shifted permanently against Zionism because I started paying closer attention to what was happening. The Second Intifada began, but we were like wined and dined. There was very little sleep. It was like an electrifying experience. There was so much group camaraderie. On the Birthright trip, it's also this gigantic sex vacation. They're encouraging as much sex as possible, because then you'll associate Israel with eros, with like eroticism, but also they want to encourage generational continuity, because, as Jews, we don't go and convert other people. We only multiply through procreation and marriage. And it really, like, they openly encourage you to get drunk and push you into like party spaces. I did a video about this I think it's called Ziowana, for the Real News Network, where I went back and covered as a journalist a Birthright mega event that Netanyahu spoke to. All the big billionaire donors were there. What's his name? Michael Steinhardt, who's one of the biggest Zionist donors in the US, told me, I said, do you want them all to get married? Is that why you're doing this? And he said, not just married, they should just do it tonight. Like get them in bed tonight. It was like sick. And then they literally push him into a nightclub setting. And like some of the soldiers are like there, like young attractive female and male soldiers will start dancing with them. And like, I would see that take place. I like the last night of my birthright trip, I was like exhausted, and I woke up and like there was a knock on my door, and a young woman had just come to the door from who I'd never met before. And she was just like offering herself up. And I mean, you know, maybe some people watching this will laugh at me, but I just shut the door and went back to sleep. I woke up later that night, and my roommate it was on the balcony looking out over the Dome of the Rock, getting a hand job. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And, you know, the freshman members of Congress, there's like a famous story or infamous story that I think even Politico reported, where they all got so drunk in Tiberias, at Lake Tiberias, in Tiberias, the city of Tiberias in northern Israel, that they took off their clothes, and at least one member of Congress took off his clothes, Ben Quayle, who was the son of former Vice President Dan Quayle, and jumped into the Sea of Galilee. And they just had this drunken kind of like midnight swim. That's what they're doing to them as well. And then, you know, a lot of them are like used car salesmen from suburban Texas who could have never gone to Israel, who have these Christian Zionist biblical beliefs, and they believe, and they're taken on a free trip to see the land of the Bible. Palestinians don't even exist in their mind. Yeah. They see Muslims as terrorists. So Jim Jordan is one of them. And my friend Liam Cosgrove from Zero Hedge.
I know Liam, yeah.
He was interviewing Jim Jordan. I just was like standing next to him while he was interviewing him at this this kind of like weird conservative press gaggle where like young members of different Republican members of Congress could engage with different conservative media outlets. And I was kind of tagging along, waiting for Randy Fine to walk in. Anyway, he asked Jim Jordan about his support for Israel. And Jim Jordan says, Israel is above all other issues. It's not a political issue. It's a spiritual issue. And there's no criticism allowed. I've been there 6 times, and I'm looking forward to going again. And there is no questioning the alliance with Israel. And so that's how I think the Republican members of Congress see it. Then for the Democrats, it's like, it's becoming uncomfortable for them. A lot of them aren't going on these trips, but you have like Democrats like Wesley Bell, who are basically just paid tools of AIPAC. And if they refuse to go, they're out of Congress. Like Wesley Bell was brought into Congress specifically to destroy Cori Bush because she was taking up the mantle of the Palestinian cause. And AIPAC spent like $12 million to get this backbencher St. Louis alderman into Congress with Super Bowl style ads. And none of the ads, by the way, had anything to do with Israel. They set up these stealth packs like Americans for Democracy and Fairness. And Cori Bush voted against Joe Biden's supplemental bill on the, you know, it's all like, and it's all that. So they just have to go. And then it's like a humiliation ritual for them where they have to go to the wall and they have to go to the Gaza border. And I mean, did you see the picture that the Democrats or various senators took with Netanyahu?
Yep.
And Cory Booker, you can just see his forehead behind someone because Netanyahu owns him. Cory Booker's whole career is sponsored by Zionist billionaires. And he had to be in that picture, but you could tell he didn't want to show his face. So that's the Democrats. But yeah, on these trips, the other thing that happens on these trips for lawmakers is they're all under surveillance. Like their hotel rooms are surveilled. Everything is being watched, and Israel's gathering tons of intelligence on the U.S. government through them.
Yeah, it is something. I mean, it's, you know, part of the dynamic with all of this is just that now that kind of the corporate media has just been, you know, kind of destroyed in the marketplace, like and as particularly young people are just not getting their news from corporate media outlets. It's almost there's this interesting dynamic where Israel, the Israeli lobby, it was always like the third rail of American politics. But once you get into this new decentralized media and they don't have that control and you're just allowed to talk about this, and even some people could argue against it, it's just too bizarre for people to not see it. Like, it's so freaking weird. I mean, I remember even being struck by, so I was reading your piece, or was it your piece or was it someone else at the Gray Zone? I think it was yours, but where you were, it was a piece about Charlie Kirk and the meeting in the Hamptons, and you ran a picture of the guy who you just mentioned. I'm sorry,
Xavier DeRousseau.
Yes, him, and it was, and one of the girls who it's
Emily Wilson.
Is it Emily? Yeah, I think I debated her on Pierce Morgan once, which was, like I literally, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think her big thing to me, we were like debating on Pierce Morgan, and I might be confusing her with someone else, but I think it was her, and she was like, well, Egypt occupied Gaza and Jordan occupied the West Bank, and I don't hear you criticizing them. Why is that? And I was like, well, primarily because it ended in 1967. And she was like, okay. Like, it's just like the most just ridiculous guy. But anyway, so there's a picture of the two of them, and it's them that they post online in Bridgehampton at the time of this meeting, which people don't know, I think is about a half hour away from East Hampton. It's like another one of those fancy schmancy towns. And they're like at this posh hotel, and they're kind of taking these glamour shots. And even just that, I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? I thought, are you in the business of, like, we talk about politics? Like, do you have deep convictions about issues of policy that you believe in because you have like a worldview and principles, or are you like an Instagram 20-year-old chick taking like bikini pictures? Like, what? Like I'm just saying, like, like when I go to, like, I got a lot of friends, in broadly speaking, our camp in this world. If I go to Austin, Texas, like I might meet up with Scott Horton and grab a steak, but like, we're going to grab dinner and talk. We're not like, let's go take pictures of us posing outside. Like, it's just seems like such a bizarre thing. There's like this bizarre cultural dynamic amongst the crazy pro-Zionists influencers. It's like they're just like in a different world playing a different game than those of us who are just talking about issues that matter.
Well, it's creepy. I mean, they're actors. They sort of were like, a lot of them were basically on Bill Ackman's casting couch, and they have no principles. They're vapid. And, some of them, I feel sorry for them because they're coming from a lot less privilege. And therefore, this is like a big opportunity for them to move up in class by getting basically Jewish billionaire money to shill for Israel. That's where the Black influencers come in. And there is a major component of this. Wealthy, right-wing, racist Jews buying Black people to do their bidding. Bill Ackman was part of a WhatsApp group of 50. It sounds like an anti-Semitic conspiracy, or like something, a film commissioned by Joseph Goebbels. But Bill Ackman was part of a WhatsApp group of 50 Zionist billionaires who were planning basically operations after October 7th to stop student activism, specifically at Columbia University, against the genocide. And one of their major action items on their agenda was paying Black personalities, public figures, to do what they wanted, to speak against Palestine solidarity activism. And so that's why you see such a disproportionate number of Black influencers at that Hampton summit, along with the attractive women that they can get there. Emily Wilson was previously critical of Israel. She said so publicly. Like, there are tweets screenshotting what she said before Bill Ackman got to her. Afterwards, she was on her way to Israel to kiss the wall, and Xavier DeRousseau was sent to a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or I would call them Gaza Holocaust Facilitator aid hub in Gaza, where he mocked the population for starving and claimed that Hamas was eating all the ramen, and that's why Hamas leaders were taking Ozempic. And I mean, that's what he was being paid to do. So this is the future of pro-Israel media. It's just basically prostitutes being paid by Zionist billionaires. And why are they doing it? They're afraid that white and Black Christian men from military communities, basically communities where the military is one of the only options to be able to pay for college or move up in class. And so they join in very high numbers. Also Latino males who voted for Trump in record numbers, that they will not support Israel, and therefore they will not fight Israel's wars. And so they need to keep them mobilized and motivated. Once they start questioning a ground war in Iran, that could be a big problem. So, I mean, that's the long-term agenda here, and it's all paid for. It's all bought and paid for, which alienates people and it fuels anti-Semitism. It really looks like some kind of anti-Semitic conspiracy playing out. It's not good for the Jews. We're like 3% of the population, and you have this billionaire class that so many Jews I know despise. I hate them.
Yeah.
And they are basically ruling through fear, intimidation, manipulation, and bribery against the wishes of a majority, increasingly a majority of the population. And like, we're being used as Jews, all Jews, as a human shield for them and for Netanyahu.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you can't, it's amazing to watch it play out too. And that there's not, like, I hear from, say, people in the Jewish community who are not exactly thrilled with my views on Israel or some of the stuff I've publicly said over the last few years. And they'll talk, they'll talk about the threat of anti-Semitism and the spike in anti-Semitism over the last couple years. And I'll just say, I'll be like, okay, so just even from your worldview, do you think that's a coincidence that it spiked in the last 2 years? Like, might this have something to do with what Israel is doing to these poor, helpless, captive people? Like, I mean, how can you defend? These are people who don't have an army to defend them, don't have a state of their own, that they've been denied by the Israeli government, and now you're just slaughtering them. I mean, how can you and it's almost just out of self-preservation, you would think, that like so many of these Jews would wake up and go, oh yeah, this is going to, like, it's some sick self-fulfilling prophecy where, yeah, you are actually going to create a situation where it's unsafe for Jewish people. And you've already created a situation that's very unsafe for the Palestinians. Like, what are we doing here? So let me say, phrase it like this. So, because I do think something like, to me, with the Charlie Kirk thing, there's almost like, there's three areas that I'd kind of separate here, where there's the really interesting stuff that we've been talking about, which is like, what exactly was going on with Charlie Kirk? Like, where was he in the, look, Charlie Kirk, like I said on my show the other day, I said, at the very least, he wasn't Ben Shapiro. People are acting like he was just Ben Shapiro and that's it. And it's like, well, Ben Shapiro ain't hosting me and moderating a debate between me and someone else. He's not hosting Tucker and Megyn Kelly. So like, clearly there was this battle. So that's a very interesting component, particularly because, the Netanyahu and they're all trying to use his death already. And so if they want to play that card, it's like, well, let's actually have a very interesting discussion about what it was like to be someone who was trying to corral young people and toe the Zionist line over this the last few months. Then there's also which, I'm sure both of us will talk about going forward. It's like how this is going to be weaponized and used. And I'm not just talking about like the Jimmy Kimmel stuff, but I'm talking about Pam Bondi talking about how this is proof we need to fight hate speech at like anti-Semitism, like AKA the pro-Palestinian left-wingers now need to be cracked down on. So we'll see what happens with that. But then there's the other component of it, which I do want to ask you about before we're out of time, which is just the actual assassination itself. Now, I have been battling a bit even with my own audience at time here, where I've been just saying for the whole week that like a lot of people are jumping on this Israel did it theory, and I'm like, look guys, there really just is no evidence for this, and we don't want to all come off like kooks and kind of like partially just on the face of it, I don't want to promote something that's untrue. I don't want people to believe something that's not true. And then right after that, you're like, guys, let's not discredit the entire critical of Israel movement by doing what it seems to me that a majority of the internet is doing, which is just jumping on this thing because that's the conclusion they prefer. But then there is also another component, which is like, there are some legitimate questions about the actual event, which are like, I've had a few different things that have raised my eyebrows while reading it. So in terms of the actual assassination, I know you said in your article there's no evidence to suggest Israel is behind this. What are your thoughts on that, the people who are jumping on board with that conspiracy, and anything that is an oddity to you about the actual assassination?
Well, yeah, I've said that in multiple interviews too, that I don't have any evidence of an Israeli government or Israeli role in Charlie Kirk's killing. I stick to the facts. That's why I'm still here. The reason that this resonates, the idea that Israel played a role resonates, is Netanyahu himself and Israel in general maintain power through lying, manipulation, intimidation, and assassination, especially assassination. And Netanyahu rose to power after the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, his main political rival, and Leah Rabin, Rabin's wife, said Netanyahu incited his murder. Netanyahu marched in front of a mock coffin that said Rabin on it just days before the murder. I mean, and then Netanyahu's coalition partners, Ben Gvir, et cetera, they are like the spiritual heirs of Yigal Amir, who assassinated Rabin. So this is like Netanyahu's MO. He just tried to assassinate the entire negotiating team of Hamas inside a U.S. ally. And Israel has global assassination squads. But, you know, what they would have done and what they were planning to do, and you could already see Laura Loomer rolling out the campaign, was to character assassinate Charlie Kirk if he continued to go off message. Yep. That's what they do. That's what they did to me. And, you know, if I got like an op-ed in the New York Times, not that I would want to, they would try to destroy my reputation. That's what they're doing to Candace Owens. Like, I don't believe they're going to send a sniper to take out Candace Owens, but I hope she has good security because, you know, maybe they want to inspire some vigilante or something, but it's not like the Mossad's MO to go inside a U.S. ally and do this. At the same time, there's another reason why people are spinning out their own theories. And I don't want to attack these people, actually. Like, I think, you know, people should be asking questions. We are not witnessing a credible investigation into Charlie Kirk's killing. Starting with the text messages, the exchange between this shooter, Tyler Robinson, and his supposed furry trans lover, roommate, they read like something written by a 65-year-old federal law enforcement officer.
That is true.
And the words being used are something I've never heard 22-year-old people using, even as a Gen Xer when I was 22. Nobody said, I'm going to retrieve the weapon from the vehicle and leave it at the drop point. Andrew Colvett yesterday declaring that there's no exit wound because Charlie Kirk had a spine of steel. That doesn't inspire confidence. He's told that by the ER doctor. And shouldn't the ER doctor be telling the media, or the FBI should be telling the media that that's why there's no exit wound? Why are we learning that from basically the spokesman for Charlie Kirk?
It also was like it did have a very like Ghost of Kiev type feel to the story. Like, I'm sure that makes some people feel nice, but could we get back to what's plausibly real and not just like these made up stories? But yes, I agree.
Now we're hearing it was a World War I era, I guess Mauser rifle, and therefore it didn't have a serial number. Unusual. The removal of the camera from behind Charlie Kirk. Again, this is like what people are talking about. This is what the internet's talking about. I'm not just like trying to present to you the theory of the crime. But a staffer for TPUSA removed a camera that was filming behind Charlie Kirk, which would provide a lot of, I think, visual context on where the shot came from, and remove the SD cards. And Andrew Colvett goes out and says he did the right thing in the middle of a crime scene to remove the SD cards. And the FBI has the footage, but he's someone who loved Charlie Kirk. I don't know what the FBI is saying about this. There are so many other odd issues here. The photo of Tyler Robinson at the Dairy Queen 15 minutes after the shooting, the comments by federal law enforcement that Tyler Robinson took 1 minute on the roof to carry out this operation, which I think would be difficult to do even for a professional sniper. And the jerking of Charlie Kirk's head, I guess he's according to the official version is he's hit from the front on the left side of his neck, but his head jerks that way. And so many people are formulating the theory that he was actually shot from behind to his right. And so we're at a point where anyone who's paying attention, who's paying close attention, who isn't like invested in the TPUSA MAGA franchise is not going to believe the official story at this point. And there have just been so many failures on the part of Kash Patel and the FBI as well. So the theories are going to continue to abound, and some of them will focus on Israel. And it really doesn't help to have Netanyahu go out twice, first on Newsmax, which is a vehicle for Israeli influence, taking money from the Israeli foreign ministry, and then on his own personal prime minister channel to deny killing Charlie Kirk. Like, when have you ever seen a foreign leader just on his own voluntarily deny killing a major U.S. public figure? It's just a little.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, that there is no question that's right. And there even for someone like me who's been saying, like, hey, we really shouldn't jump to conclusions, and there's no evidence Israel was actually involved in the assassination. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't admit that I do in some way think that they deserve this presumption of guilt that they're getting. And I do think you're absolutely right, particularly coming off of the heels of, which, by the way, ironically was the topic that got all these Zionist donors so mad at Charlie Kirk at the event, was that Megyn and Tucker were talking about the Trump administration burying the Epstein stuff. And off the heels of that cover up, it's like this administration, this FBI, this Justice Department just have no credibility amongst, their voters, that if Israel was involved in this, nobody has confidence that they would actually get to the bottom of it and tell the truth. Look, to be clear, I don't think any of us should jump to any conclusions. And like you said, sticking to the facts, that's the best course of action here.
Can I make one other point?
Sure. Absolutely. Let me just quickly say that I certainly am not telling anybody to stop asking questions or to stop investigating or to stop being suspicious. So that's always healthy. But yes, final point to you, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to do your own research. Well, I would accept that Tyler Robinson could have done this alone, and that he could have been motivated by Charlie Kirk's anti-trans commentary, that this was some kind of trans shooting. Like, there could have been a component of mental illness there as well. I can accept that. But does that mean that Tyler Robinson is a leftist? If he was on some of these weird nihilistic Discord channels, which are themselves penetrated or at least surveilled by federal law enforcement, was he a leftist, or was he a Democrat or a progressive? If they could show that he was at No Kings rallies holding up signs like calling Trump a pedophile or something, then I'd be like, all right, well, there it is. And like, the No Kings rallies went too far, run with it. But the narrative is already set. The narrative is and this is what the Trump administration has been trying to do all along, is keep the United States in a perpetual state of emergency in order to expand the power of the executive and the surveillance state and Palantir to surveil us, control us, and consolidate the power of his very narrow sectarian movement. And this is the perfect opportunity for them to do it. And we have to be very aware of what's going on and question not just the official story, but who Tyler Robinson really was. Because when Charlie Kirk was shot at Utah Valley University, he was being protested by a group of progressive students. One was holding up a sign that said Free Palestine. Another one had like a pro-LGBTQ sign. Another had a sign, maybe denouncing Charlie Kirk's comments on race or something. And they were interviewed by a pro-Trump videographer. I just watched this. I'll tweet the video out later. And he was challenging them. And they said, and they said that we don't hate anyone here. We still love them. We just disagree with them and think they're being misled. Then he starts challenging them on Palestine and Hamas. They condemned political violence immediately. They said, we just don't think like, we just are like, we want to debate this. That's really like the progressive left, as I understand it. They're not really going to get on a roof with a sniper rifle and settle things that way. They're waiting for the next midterm election.
Yeah.
And that's who is being implicated as the killers here. We're talking about like 50% of the country. That's who Trump is implicated. And they want this civil war. They want to pit us against each other, because what does Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp, describe as his business model, it's preventing social unrest from affecting or disrupting the lives of the 1% who sponsors him. That's what he openly says. So let's be level-headed here. Let's not get carried away, and let's be strategic. The most threatening thing right now is unity against those forces of surveillance, of apartheid, of genocide, of authoritarian control of the United States, and the profiting from surveillance that Palantir represents. So I think that's another reason why it's important to question not just the official story, but the direction that this assassination is being taken. And it's also why it's so why someone like Candace Owens is so threatening to the right, is because she's making it more difficult for them to just simply pin this on the left conveniently and then take away our civil liberties.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And that's always, I mean, that's always their go-to.
I mean, the Democrats would do it too if someone had, shot Biden, they would have shut down Elon's Twitter X,
Yeah. But the truth is that, every day Sean Hannity says the far left Nancy Pelosi or whatever. And then that's supposed to mean 50% of the country is the left and the other 50% is the right, as if they're all the same thing, as if Hillary Clinton and your liberal mom and some 20-year-old gender studies major are all the same thing or something, when really the dynamic is always that Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell are the same thing, and that actually they're your enemy and your fellow countrymen are not. And they always want to make it so that you think your fellow countrymen are your enemy, so that you don't focus on the fact that it's actually them. And it's like you said, the constant state of war, perpetual emergency, and perpetual support for Israel, which all seem to somewhat be interrelated.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a strategy of tension that is taking hold right now. And I think, we're in the double digits in this country of people who just are done with the duopoly, the corporate duopoly, and are willing to put aside the culture war to actually have real change and basically unite against the 0.1% and the war state. But we don't have a vehicle, and we're basically not allowed to run in either party. So we're just kind of out here in our podcast world.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But at the very least, we've been given more of a level playing field than ever. And part of the dynamic that we were talking about there with Charlie Kirk and the young people is that us, and I say this very broadly, but we've just been kicking their ass in the general debate. And I mean, that's just the bottom line. Like, we just keep winning and they keep losing, and support keeps because they're defending the indefensible. And once it's just like there's a reason why they rely on censorship and propaganda, because their ideas can't really stand up. But listen, we
won in the marketplace of ideas. We won, so they're going to call it all hate speech,
right? Yeah,
and and then leaving the only avenue, political violence. So I mean, we just want to debate.
Yes, 100%. Max, thank you so much. Please, if you guys weren't already familiar with his work, make sure to go check out Max Blumenthal. Anything specific that you want to promote? You said you're going to have a new piece on this out soon.
Well, if you follow Dave Smith, then you probably have some overlap with me, and you'll hear about it soon. So, the Gray Zone. Subscribe to us on YouTube or Substack, and you'll find out about it.
All right, Max Blumenthal, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for everything you do, and I hope we get to do this again sometime soon.
Thanks a lot, for sure. Great meeting you.
You too. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Catch you next time. Peace.